But what caused that for him was in phys ed, they did the captain's pick for who was going to be on what team, and he was left to last every time. And I get upset thinking about that as an activity for kids, how distressing that is if you're always picked last. And it doesn't create resilience if the same kids are always picked last, by the way. Yeah. And so for me, I get a bit cranky about that. But anyway, the phys ed teacher was so brilliant. So I spoke to him about this was causing a lot of anxiety and what could we do. And what the phys ed teacher did in the morning of phys ed on a whiteboard, he put the names of what groups everyone was going to be in, what teams and activities, and who Edward was going to be with in his window on the morning of phys ed. I just love that. Small change. And Edward didn't have those meltdowns when he got home, but not only that, really participated more because he wasn't so anxious to participate. He knew who he was going to be with. Hi everyone, welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast. Many of the kids and students I work with have difficulty with change, or transition is what I call it. What I mean is movement from one activity from another, from home to school, at home, going to bed. Any change can cause anxiety. And those of you who have attended my live virtual workshops, you'll know the number one thing I say we need to do before we do anything else is get a child's anxiety down. And once we get their anxiety down, then we can get their problem solving up. So those of you who have attended my face-to-face or live virtual workshops in the last 12 months, I would love you to grab out your handout and look at the checklist of things. What have you put in place to help students with transition or change? And what have you done to reduce their anxiety during change? Now, if you haven't attended one of my workshops, one of the key concepts I talk about in my days is that most strategies only work for 1 in 10 kids. 1 in 10. But for that one kid, it makes the world of difference. I would love, love, love you in listening to this workshop today, this podcast today, to take away one idea, just one. I'm going to give you probably at least 20 ideas. I've got so many things I want you to try, but I'd love you to just take away one and see if that makes a world of difference to you and the kids you know. Now, it doesn't matter what age, from early years right through to adulthood, change can cause anxiety. And the reason I think that we get the most behaviour during change is because there's often a lot of movement and sensory. When I'm moving from sitting in a chair to moving back to my table, sitting on the mat to my table, there's movement, there's kids, there's people touching, the noise goes up. When I'm moving from outside to inside, again, there's often a bell going, there's sensory. When I'm at home and I'm sitting playing my PlayStation and having a lovely time and I have to go to bed, then that's a big change. I have to think about all the things I need to do. There's a lot of sensory, but often as adults, we get really verbal and we start to hurry kids up. During change, we are renowned for being like, hurry up, come on, get going. And this can cause anxiety too, both sensory and verbal overload. So when I worked at the Autism School in Melbourne, we had some university students come and observe when most behaviour happened. And it was so interesting because it was absolutely in change or transition. So from moving from inside, from outside, at the end of the day, from the classroom to the bus, coming in the morning, there was a huge amount of behaviour in the morning. And we really looked at all of the times we got behaviour. It was going to the toilet, kid running up and down the corridor. So I'd love you, if you can, to maybe just pause this podcast now and have a think, where do you see behaviour? Where do you see the most behaviour? And could it be because of the things I'm talking about? Could it be that the child's been asked to problem solve, to make a choice, like where to go, what to do, how to start a new activity? Could it be because of sensory? There's a lot of movement and noise. Could it be because you're starting to use your voice and not visuals? Or could it be that you have not pre-warned them and you're suddenly like, come on, it's bedtime. Come on, start your work. And you haven't given them time to process the change. As many people with the autism spectrum tell us, they have to shut down and reload, like your computer, shutting down and reloading. And that has to do with executive functioning. In fact, a lot of these things have to do with executive functioning because remember, executive functioning, those of you who have listened to that podcast, is like an air traffic controller with different planes coming in and out and information coming in and out. So during transition, we need really good executive function skills. We need working memory to remember what we're doing, where we're going. We need emotional regulation if people bump into us or take a pencil we wanted or we're not first in the line. There's so much of this happening. Plus, we need to be able to block out a lot of things going on. In the playground, you need to block out and focus on getting to the line. But for many of my ADHD kids, I'm like, oh, I need a drink. Oh, I need the toilet. So a kid running late to class, that could be what the problem is, what the challenge is. One of my favorite sayings is, it's easier to change the structure than change the child. So today, I'm going to give you some tips to help you change the structure. What can you put in place to help change it? Now, in my live virtual events, we go into this in a lot more detail in A, getting anxiety down, and B, in the key times we need in place strategies for transitions and things that you can do. So if you have joined me for a live virtual or a face-to-face, make sure you get out your notes and have a look. There's slides that relate specifically to this. Or if you're available, join me this term or next year. Join me for one of these upcoming workshops. They are fast-moving, interactive. If you're like, oh, Sue, I'm zoomed out, it's not like that. Everyone who does my live virtual are like, wow, that was just the best day. And I had a teacher last term email me who made me cry, like literally the changes in the student, as she said, from just small little things she put in place. So I thought I'd take the word transition and use the letters in transition to help you think about how you can help a child transition. So what we mean by transition is change from one activity to another. So whenever there's a change, what can you put in place? So T is for time, not rushing children, giving them time to pack away and get ready to transition. I love 5-minute warnings. Some kids need 10. You need to experiment. How big a warning do they need? But pre-warning about change is vital. Now, here's the big one. Transition starts the day or night before. When I worked at the autism school, the big change I made when I had a class of 8 kids with limited communication was we went through the daily schedule before they left, what we were doing the next day. So we're finished Tuesday, tomorrow's Wednesday, and we would go through what we had on Wednesday. And for some of my students, we would put out the first activity of the day on their desk waiting for them. For my kids who I had trouble getting off the bus in the morning or coming into the classroom, I would have out something they were looking forward to doing the next day. So they knew there was no problem solving then. They came in, hung up their bag, and went straight to that activity. So where can you start transition the night before? And for children with trauma, I believe getting out their clothes the night before. I think teachers should be talking to the kids what they're doing the next day before. And if they're wearing a uniform, laying out the uniform, having that out. So when you wake up in the morning, there's a visual. You don't have to think, where's my t-shirt? Where's my shorts? They're out, ready, waiting for you. Getting kids to choose that the night before can make a huge difference. And when kids are at school, one of my parents did this years ago, and I thought it was so clever. She would get her son to help choose what snack he was going to have at the day for school the next day and pack that in his bag. As a visual, I've got school tomorrow and I'm taking tiny teddies so that he would have something to look forward to. Think of yourself. Do you pack your lunch the night before? So getting kids in these routines, which is number 2. R for routine. So the more routines in transition, the better. So for example, come in, hang up your bag, put your reader in the box. For example, having a set spot in the line, not find a partner. All of these words, they cause anxiety. They're all problem solving. So having a routine to minimize the problem solving, having a set hook for them to hang their bag on, a set spot on the mat, a set spot in the line. The more routines, the less problem solving. Because if one day they line up, the next day they come straight into class, the next day they sit on the mat, one day they go to a desk, this is confusing. Always start with the first step the same. Wherever possible, think, where can I have a routine? The reason you put your car keys, hopefully, in the same spot is so you know where they are. More routines, the less problem solving. So where can you put in routines? Next one is, what action do they need to take? Where do they need to go? What do they need to do? So A for action. So often we just say pack away instead of put your book in your bag, put your pencil back in your pencil case. Be clear and concise. Put the trains back in the tub and put it on the shelf. What actions do they need to take? Think about your words. And those of you who've done my workshops, I talk about I'm a GPS. This is where you need to be a GPS. Clear, concise instructions. Tell what to do, not what not to do. So you don't say, don't put your pencil on that table. Tell them, put the pencil in the blue tin. Clear, concise. The next one's really important, and those of you who watch the Temple Grandin lesson, she talks about this. It's no surprises. Coming in and rearranging the classroom is just going to cause, that's too much change for this child. Let them know the night before, tonight I'm going to hang up a new decoration in the classroom, or I'm changing the theme and I'm taking down space and I'm putting up this, or I'm moving your desk. When I do transition to the new school year, I like the kids to come in the day before and actually see where they're going to sit, where they're going to hang up their bag without 30 kids in there and all the emotions of any child at their first day back at school. So no surprise is a good surprise. So if there's going to be a change, how can you pre-warn them? If you're going to have a day off school or a school closure, how can you let them know that? And that's why I love a calendar, actually marking off the calendar and noticing Saturday, Sunday, we stay home. Monday, we go to school. Oh, this week it's the Queen's birthday. We're staying home. So then there's no surprise on that. But also those other surprises. Oh, we've got an excursion today, or we've got a special guest today. Don't surprise them. No surprise is a good surprise, because that is just like overwhelm for my kids. So N for no surprises. The next one is S for schedule. And I know you all know how important schedules are, but different kids need different amount of information on a schedule. Some you can just do, we're doing maths tomorrow. Some need to know we're doing maths page 58. Some kids need to be told on the schedule we're doing reading groups. Some need to know who is in their reading group. For some of my students, who their partner is really important, knowing who they're working with. And they're one of the surprises some of my kids don't like. In fact, in my Ultimate Guide to School and Home, I talk about a little boy called Edward who used to hold it together at school and have a big meltdown when he got home, a veneer of coping. And lots of you have heard me talk about that. But what caused that for him was in phys ed, they did the captain's pick for who was going to be on what team, and he was left to last every time. And I get upset thinking about that as an activity for kids, how distressing that is if you're always picked last. And it doesn't create resilience if the same kids are always picked last, by the way. And so for me, I get a bit cranky about that. But anyway, the phys ed teacher was so brilliant. So I spoke to him about this was causing a lot of anxiety and what could we do. And what the phys ed teacher did in the morning of phys ed on a whiteboard, he put the names of what groups everyone was going to be in, what teams and activities, and who Edward was going to be with in his window on the morning of phys ed. I just love that. Small change. And Edward didn't have those meltdowns when he got home, but not only that, really participated more because he wasn't so anxious to participate. He knew who he was going to be with. So make sure that you have schedules, that your schedules include the information that's important to this child, which is the next one, I for information. What information does this student or child need? Do they need to know what's happening when? Do they need to know who they're going to be with? Do they need to know what activities are planned. So when we had cooking, I would tell the kids what recipe we were cooking the next day. Or if we were going out on the bus, where we were going, not just that morning going, oh, today we're going here. Or I'd have a rainy day activities and like an inside activity and outside activities for lunchtime. So they knew what was going to happen, not just lunchtime and suddenly, oh, it's raining, we're staying in today. I would have what movie we were going to watch or what activities they could do depending on what was planned, because normally teachers pre-plan what's going to happen in the lunchtime depending who's supervising. So that's important. Remember, information needs to be clear and concise, not we're staying inside. What are we doing inside today? What exactly are we doing? Now, I've got T for time again for pre-warning, but the reason I've got this time is think about how the child actually can access time. Is it a time timer? Is it a digital clock? Is it a whiteboard with a clock that ticks down? So many schools have analog clocks and the student cannot access it. They might be able to read that's 10:30, but they don't know that's 10 minutes until they have to finish an activity. Can they actually access time? Now, if you look on my website, I have both digital timers and time timers. The time timers now have this brilliant there's two, the small and medium, and the medium used to be called large. I don't know why they've renamed it medium. It's very frustrating. But they put there's a change that's not a good surprise where people rename something and it confuses you. So they've got little cards now that slide in the top so you can actually put your now, next, later, which we'll come to in a minute. But you can actually tell the child how long they're going to be on something, and I think they should know what they're doing next. So time. And how big a pre-warning do they need? Suddenly saying it's time to go to school. Do they need a 10-minute warning, a 5-minute warning? ADHD kids do their best work in the last 5 minutes. They often procrastinate, and then you say 5 minutes to go, zoom. They do their best study often the night before something's due. And knowing that can make a huge difference. So some of my ADHD kids in secondary, I'll actually tell them things are due one day before they're due to me to look at. That's what I used to do when I worked in a secondary base room. So I need to see your work on the 13th. It's due on the 14th. So we've got time to put in any changes. So think about how you use time and help them manage time, because time management's part of executive functioning. Now, the other thing I found with time over the years, sometimes when you notice using a word, when I said sometimes, I'm like, oh, time, sorry. Sometimes I find moving a child 5 minutes before everyone else. So letting them move to the mat first, letting them line up first. Now, they don't have to be first in line. They can still be number 5 and other children can come in, but letting them move before everybody else with all the noise and movement. I had one boy when he used to get off the bus at the special school, he would get highly anxious, but when I let him get off first, he could go in, hang up his bag without 10 other children around him. Made a huge difference. So can you move that child first? In secondary, I often send them 5 minutes before the bell because they can go to their locker without everybody there. They can move to the next class, go to the toilet without everyone in the toilet. So could you move them 5 minutes before? One of my students, what worked at school was him coming in early to class in the morning and just settling in. He used to do a few jobs for the teacher, coming in early. So how can you use time to help them settle, to calm? How can you prepare them, but also stop the rushing? How can you take the rush out? How can you give them that little bit of time to adjust? I don't know about you, but I like to get places early. I don't like rushing. I would prefer to be 5 minutes early than rushing in the door to a doctor's appointment. I prefer to be 5 minutes early to meet up with somebody than running late. Now, different people I've got an auntie who's always running late. Depends on you, but most of my kids don't like being rushed. They hate being rushed, especially rushed to finish something that they're enjoying. So when they're doing something they love, think about how are you going to help them know how much time they've got. Now, I would prefer it's not you telling them 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I would prefer you used a time timer. Managing time is a life skill. I can't emphasize enough the importance of actually giving the kids the skills to look at a clock and go, oh, I've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Exams in the future, in a job, their boss will want them to work to time, catching public transport. Time is a very important life skill. So think about how you can get them to actually manage their own time, because so many of the kids I know in secondary are used to looking at their phone, but they're not allowed their phone out in class. So how can we help them manage time? Next one is I, and I couldn't come up with anything for the letter I, but this one's an important one. Visuals. Make sure you use visuals. Don't use your words all the time. Make sure you use visuals to support your communication. Now, visuals can be signings. For example, if you're working in the early childhood, one teacher goes, everybody pack away, and one goes, hurry up, it's time to line up, or lunchtime's finished. Every one of those mean finish. So you might use the sign for finish. You can just Google that or look on YouTube. And as long as everyone's consistent with the sign for finish, it doesn't matter. The reason we use signing is to have consistent gesture. Because one person says pack away and flaps their hands around. Another preschool teacher starts singing, everybody pack away. What we need to do is everyone is signing finish, even if their words are different. Yes, so you might be saying put the puzzle on the shelf, but signing finish to let the child know they're finished. Or you might use a visual for finish, which we tend to use like the car racing finish, the black and white checkered flag for finish. But I'd encourage you to think about how can you help this child know they need to finish. The other thing during transition, they often need to learn to wait. So I think actually having the sign for wait as well as an important sign in transition, because often they have to wait for a turn or wait to line up or wait to hang up their bag or wait for something. So finish and wait are very important words to know to use during transition, because they tell the child what to do. When you say wait, it tells them what to do. Instead of don't push in, wait for a turn. It's actually wait. Wait for a turn. Wait to get in the line. Wait to hang up your bag. Wait, yeah? So think about how you can use the word wait and finish, and whether you're going to use a visual or a sign. Because so often we don't have our visuals on us during transition or change. So this is where signing can supplement your visuals. The next one is O. And again, couldn't come up with a word for O, but consistency, I think, is the key. Put in place your timers, make sure you use them. Put in place your routine, go through your schedule the day before. Don't just do it once off. Lay out their clothes the night before. Don't do that once off. Transition starts the night before every night. Transition to bed at home for kids who have trouble sleeping, turning off the device an hour before. We know for ADHD kids makes a massive difference. Now, if you don't do that and the kid can't get to sleep, that's you not being consistent. For me, getting a child to go 5 minutes early to the next lesson, I need to be consistent. All teachers in secondary need to do that, not just the maths teacher. So think, how can we be consistent? And the next one in transition is the N, which is the last one. And I think this is where we need the now, next, later. And in my book, The Ultimate Guide, that I wrote for with Anna Tullemans, we talk about real choices and how often when we're using the now, next, later, it's very important that the child is clear what they're doing next and what choices they can have in the next. It's not, you can go on your iPad. I'm trying to think of a good example here, sorry. But Anna gives a great example where she'd say to Daniel, you can do your homework at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. Yep. So you're going to come home. Now you're going to go on your computer. Next, you're going to do homework. Are you going to do that at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock? Okay. You're going to do it at 5 o'clock. So you're going to go on your gaming till 5 o'clock. Then you're going to go on your gaming for half an hour. And then later, what are they doing when they get off? Because otherwise they will think they are on the computer for the rest of the night. So I like the thing they love to be in the next, so they know how long they're on it and what they're doing after the later. So now, next, later. Yes? Or so you might even do the now is the technology, next is the homework, later, what are they doing? Going to bed. Be clear what they're doing when. But I don't like the later being the reward, because so often then they think they're not getting off it. They're staying on that for the rest of their life. Now, one of my fantastic families many years ago, and I always think of this as an example of not telling the child the whole picture. So they were going on a family holiday, first family holiday where they're going on a plane. The mum was so proactive in getting ready. That's a big transition. So I took her little boy to the airport a couple of times. We went through security. We watched the conveyor belts. We watched the planes. There was a McDonald's. We went to McDonald's there. So we did all the things because my mum's biggest fear was what if the plane got delayed. And so I'd show on the board, look, the plane's delayed. Sometimes planes are on time. Sometimes they're delayed. We took lots of photos. Qantas were amazing. He got to go on a plane. We did everything like that. Okay, the mum got on Google, had pictures of where they were going on holidays. She had everything set up. What we didn't do was tell him he was coming home. We told him all about the preparation to go on the holiday, getting there on the plane, what he was doing on his holiday, but we didn't say coming home, back on the plane. Biggest meltdown ever when they went to leave their holiday. But again, change the structure, not the child. We had not told him how many days, how many sleeps he was away and what he was doing later. Later, he was coming back home and going back to school. He had no idea. This is called mind blindness, where we expect these kids to know that they're coming back home. How could he know that? Now, it's one of those ones I laugh at, and I always say the kids teach me more than I teach them. And that was a classic now that I'm really conscious. Like, it's the school holidays. We're coming back on the 26th of January. It's Easter, where I've got 4 days off for Easter, then we're coming back to school. We must tell them the later. So think about your now, next, later. Now we're sitting on the mat. Next, we're going back to our desk to do work. Later, we're going outside to play. And what are we going to do outside? You can do today the monkey bars, or being clear what they can do. I highly recommend you think about where can you help kids with transition. And the key times I'd like you to think about this: when they have to finish an activity, do they know what's coming next? No matter whether it's finishing the day, finishing their work. So many of my kids, this is where we get behavior because they don't know what to do when they're finished. So make sure they know what to do next or later. When we give them a choice of activities, minimizing their choices, particularly during transition, because remember, anxiety up, problem solving down. I prefer they come into preschool and choose between 2 puzzles than a whole shelf of puzzles. Lining up. That can cause a lot of anxiety in my kids. The sensory, relying on the adult's voice. So maybe having a set spot for them in the line or letting them go first. Another time's finding a partner. That's a big choice-making activity. Finding a partner, you have to find them. They have to want you. So just take that out of the equation. Have set partners and rotate who they're with so they know who their partner is. But even better, get the partner to come to them. I find that much more effective, getting a child to come to them, because some of my children have facial blindness and recognizing kids can be tricky. Remember to be aware of sensory issues, and some of my children will have trouble lining up because of all the touching and movement. So have a think. They might be best at the end of the line where there's less touching and movement, or the front. For many of my kids sitting on the mat, having a set spot on the mat. Again, some of them like being in the middle where they can see me. Some like being at the back, some at the side. Not every strategy works for everybody. And think about those transitions from home to school or preschool, back home in the afternoon. How can we minimize choices and change? Parents listening will know that if you decide to stop and pick up milk on the way home, that can cause massive anxiety. So at the start of this podcast, I said, I hope you find one thing to make a difference, one thing. So I want you to think about just a couple of things. One, how are you going to make sure the child knows what time it is, how long they've got on activity, when they need to move activities? How are you going to do time and transition? What can you do to prepare them the day before? What can you do? Transition starts the day before. What can you do to prepare them for what's coming next the day before? And the other big one I'd love you to think about is How do you use that now, next, later, especially when they're doing something they love, making sure they know what they're doing when they get off it? Because otherwise they won't want to get off what they're doing. Once they're absorbed in something they love, they can't even hear you. So how are you going to support them moving from a preferred activity to a less preferred activity? And that might be letting them know how long they're at on the activity and what they're doing next. I hope you've got at least one idea to try. I hope you can see that why we get often behavior during change or transition. That in transition, there's often sensory, there's often us relying on our voices, and choices. So how can you minimize the choices? I know that's a lot to take in, but I hope you've got some good ideas. And I'd love you to join me for a full day live virtual workshop coming up in November and then in January next year. I hope you've got some great tips and strategies to make a difference. Remember, strategies wear out and not every strategy works for everybody. If you're ready to dive in deeper to more strategies and ideas to make a difference, I'd highly recommend you consider Dr. Tony Attwood or my online courses. For more information, visit my website www.suelarkey.com.au.